Welcome to the Black Anarchist Podcast, a channel where critical thinkers come to learn and grow. Through pedagogical discussions, we challenge the status quo, conventional narratives, and present raw truth. I'm JC, author of Blaming on the Drastic Manufacturing of Black Homophobia and Performative Masculinity. Today, we're going to discuss why Black Wall Street was really destroyed, because this is a part of a series that I'm putting together because I am advocating for a Black state. And I really want y'all to understand why this is important, because there was an attempt to make Oklahoma a Black state. A lot of people don't know that the reason that Black Wall Street was destroyed was to obstruct the creation of a Black state. So I've talked to y'all about how I'm more of a proponent of sovereignty than reparations. Again, I'm not against reparations, but I personally don't care about reparations, because if you don't have sovereignty, then the government is going to take your money anyway. You need to have political power. I do feel oppressed. I do want a Black state. It has to be done right, because if you put the wrong people in power, then you're going to get the same result. But I believe in the right to self-determination. So I'm going to advocate for a Black state because it is absolutely possible. I mean, you guys can focus on getting a Black president. We've already had that. Of course, he wasn't. I'm going to say ADOS because I don't use FBA. He wasn't ADOS. Kamala Harris was an ADOS. And so I think that having a Black state is more important than getting someone at the federal level, because as I'm going to discuss, the state has more power than the federal government. And this is something that Eric McCabe recognized, which is why he attempted to found a Black state, but he was obstructed. So the guy you see on the screen, his name is Edward Preston McCabe. He understood that he understood something that most Black leaders did not understand, and they still don't seem to understand, because they keep focusing on the wrong thing. True freedom can only come through complete political and economic sovereignty. Let me say that again. True freedom can only come through complete political and economic sovereignty. And the reason why I wanted to read that again is because a lot of people, I mean, I get it's fine if you want to advocate for reparations. I think it's very short-sighted. We can say that it's a debt owed, and that's fine. I absolutely agree with that. But at the same time, if you don't have sovereignty, then you're going to be right back in the same position. I told y'all what John Locke said about reparations, that reparations are supposed to repair it's supposed to repair the harm that was done. So the reparations for slavery is supposed to be freedom. It's not supposed to be a cash payment. A cash payment it can supplement freedom, but you got to get the freedom first. I don't understand why people are shortchanging themselves to say they're just going to be bought off, and you're going to take a cash payment, and you don't want freedom, you don't want sovereignty. If you don't have sovereignty, you're still going to be controlled under the very system which everybody's complaining about. You're still going to face the same systemic problems that everyone seems to have a problem with, and I'm not sure why they're not focusing on sovereignty. I guess because the leaders have led you astray, and because the leaders want their cut. So they're not going to tell you to fight for sovereignty. They're going to tell you to fight for some cash reparations. If you do get cash reparations, it's not so you can go buy some damn Jordans. It's so that you can rebuild Black Wall Street, so that you can have a future for your damn children. That wasn't a part of my outline, but I just had to go on that rant, because I still hear people talking about cash reparations, and I don't hear anybody talking about sovereignty. I guess Grandmaster Jay was the only one of the, what was that group called? Not Fucking Around Coalition. He's literally the only person I've heard, and in recent history, even mention sovereignty. So yes, if you guys want, I mean, if you want to add sovereignty to it, which I think sovereignty should actually come first, but if sovereignty is a part of the discussion, then I'm going to be on board. If it's only about cash reparations without sovereignty, I'm going to say hell to the no, because I personally don't care about money. What I care about is being free from this oppressive fucking system. And the only way we're going to get, I shouldn't be cussing because I'm trying to be somewhat, I'm trying to persuade people to take me seriously. So I'm going to I'm going to refrain from cussing because I do want people to take this seriously. So that's the problem with doing a live. I can't edit that out. But anyway, let me keep going. So McKay's political. Let me start with his background. He was born in Troy, New York, in 1850. He became one of the first African Americans to hold major political office in the American Old West. He made history as Kansas's first Black state auditor and was selected as Kansas delegate at large at the Republican National Convention in Chicago, 1880. I guess that is an important thing to note that he was a Republican because back then the so-called pro-Black party wasn't the Democrats back then. It was the Republicans, and I guess there was a political realignment in the 1960s over the Civil Rights Act. I guess you could say back then the Republicans were the so-called progressive party. They were the party that supported the abolition of slavery. And a lot of people used this argument as a talking point to say that Democrats are racist. I don't think you can really put that on either party. I think the system itself is corrupt at its root. So his political success in Kansas taught him a crucial lesson. Being a token Black person in a white-controlled system was not the same as having real political power, right? It's not the same as you can participate in a system. You can be a state senator or a congressman or a mayor, a governor. You can do all those things, but you need to control all three major branches at the state level. Until you have a Black controlled state, and we don't need to control. This is not about taking over America. This is not. I mean, that's never going to happen. I'm being pragmatic. I'm saying what is realistic. You can absolutely control one state, and for those of you who listened to my last live stream, I told you there's some things that I do want to talk about with the Israel comparison. I'm going to do that in a separate video because there's some. I stumbled upon some information about the creation of Israel, but basically, before the so-called Zionist project, they thought that it was going to be. It was basically a scam. That it was going to be a hub to basically take resources for themselves and essentially what has already been done. But I'm not going to talk about that in too much detail right now because I'm going to come back and talk about that in a separate video about how Israel is being used as a hub for resources. And this is the reason why you need to have sovereignty, because we can run the same okie doke that Israel is doing. But you have to have a state first. You have to say, this is a state for the descendants of slaves. Don't make it about race, but it's about the descendants of slaves. And then you can run the same okie doke that Israel is running. And then everybody has to pay you money and you can run the guilt train that Israel's running. I mean, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Learn from what they're doing. This is the reason why I discussed Israel in that last live stream, because I wanted y'all to see how Israel was founded. What Theodore Herzl said, everything that Theodore Herzl said absolutely applies to us. But let me get back to this outline that I have. So McCabe's motivation was rooted in a deep understanding of how American federalism actually works. He recognized that states are the ones that hold real political power. They control law enforcement, education, economic policy, and the daily governance that affect people's lives. the federal government might occasionally intervene on behalf of civil rights, but states were the ones that controlled the day-to-day power that oppress or liberate its Black citizens. Right, this is what I've been trying to convince y'all about. The state actually has more political power because the state has general police powers. The federal government does not. The only reason why you guys are focusing on the federal government as opposed to the state is because of the media. The media emphasizes the federal government. So you're going to look at you're going to be focusing on Donald Trump for the next 3 years and some months, and then you're going to completely ignore what is going on locally. Which, it does matter because he's engaging in some really bad policies. But if you had a Black majority over a state, you could actually protect yourself from some of the policies that he's enacting. But you're completely vulnerable right now. You don't have a sovereign that's actually acting on your behalf. McCabe chose Oklahoma because it offered a unique opportunity. At the time that he was founding this Black State project, Oklahoma did not have statehood. So he was trying to found a Black state, right? He was trying to bring people in. It had no existing state government, no established political machines, and it had a vast amount of land. As an aside, I guess I can tell y'all this now, that there was a concerted effort to displace the Native Americans, that they deliberately sought to bring Europeans into America so that they could settle in the I'm not going to say unoccupied, but I'm going to say uncivilized parts of America. So they brought in hordes and hordes of Europeans to displace the Native Americans. And I guess he went further out to Oklahoma. So Oklahoma at the time was the ideal place to do that because it wasn't established. At this point in time, I'm not focusing on Oklahoma. I'm focusing on Mississippi because Mississippi already has 33%. I'm going to address that in a separate video, why I think Mississippi is the best place to have a Black state. So here was his master plan. He was going to organize massive migration to Oklahoma, establish Black political control in enough counties to influence territorial governance, and then ensure that when Oklahoma became a state, it would be a Black controlled state with a constitution written by and for Black people. So in 1890, McCabe arrived in Oklahoma. He immediately established the Oklahoma Immigration Association. This wasn't a settlement organization. It was the infrastructure for creating Black political power. McCabe encouraged Black immigration in such numbers. This is a direct quote. McCabe organized Black immigration in such numbers that eventually would outnumber the whites. This came directly from McCabe. This was his goal. He identified specific counties where concentrated Black settlement would quickly establish political majorities. He organized Black voters to ensure they could control local elections, county governments, and eventually territorial representation. In 1892, he predicted that within a few years, Congress would have 2 Black senators from Oklahoma. So now I'm going to play my first video, and
E.P. McCabe, a prominent man in his own right. He had been the state auditor in Kansas, highest elected Black official in Kansas, elected in 1882 and 1884. Native New Yorker, saw the opportunity to come to Oklahoma and really had ambitions of having a portion of the Oklahoma Territory carved out as an all-Black state. He met with the United States President Benjamin Harrison in 1890. They talked about it. It was considered very seriously. Articles were written about the prospect of an all-Black state in newspapers as varied as the New York Times and the Daily Oklahoman. And so there's a lot of commentary and a lot of discussion about this prospect of creating an all-black state. Ultimately, it failed, but in the process, a number of African Americans came from primarily the southeastern United States, escaping the oppression of the Deep South. Well, I think a number of things led to the failure of the black state idea. One was simply racism. There was a big fear about allowing, a large enclave of black folks to be gathered in one place. So these towns proliferated. Some of them were very successful, like Boley. Boley had the nation's first black-owned bank, first black-owned telephone company, first federally chartered black bank, very entrepreneurial community. But a lot of these communities were devastated in the recession and the depression of the late 20s and early 30s, just like many of the small rural white communities were devastated at the same time. About a dozen of those communities still remain in Oklahoma, but they're by and large struggling.
All right, so I don't know if I shared this with y'all, but I actually did live in Oklahoma for a little over 8 years because I was stationed in the military. So I've seen pretty much most of Oklahoma. I guess I'm not going to say specifically which part I live, but I've seen pretty much the entirety of Oklahoma. McCabe founded several all-black towns, most notably Lansing, Oklahoma, which became the foundation for his political empire. But these towns weren't just communities, they were political laboratories where black people could practice complete self-governance without interference. In Langston and other black towns, African Americans controlled every aspect of government. Black mayors ran city councils composed entirely of black representatives. Black sheriffs led police forces staffed by black officers. Black judges presided over black juries and cases involving black citizens. These communities proved that black people could govern themselves effectively, efficiently, and justly. I guess the part I was going to tell y'all is that Oklahoma still has sundown towns. I haven't been to Oklahoma in a very long time, but it was pointed out to me when I was there that there are certain places where you don't want to be after sundown. McCabe understood that political power without economic power was meaningless. Let me say that again. Political power without economic power was meaningless. So you can get the reparations, but if you don't have political power, then it's meaningless. This is why the development of Black Wall Street in Tulsa was so crucial to his broader vision of black statehood, because people just want to focus on Black Wall Street. Why? I mean, can you not talk about the destruction of the Black State Project in conjunction with Black Wall Street? Because that was equally important. Black Wall Street wasn't just a prosperous black neighborhood. It was an economic engine that could fund political independence, right? This is what I'm trying to tell you. You can't just focus on the money. Money is a means to an end. It is not an end unto itself. So if you want to attain wealth to liberate your people, that's one thing. But if you just want to get wealth so you can go buy a bag, that's a completely different conversation. And I don't have any interest in that. If you want to build and you actually do want to have some political power, I guess, so I'm going to suffice it to say that I'm more interested in the political power than I am in the economics. That is my wheelhouse. I guess my knowledge is in politics. The economic portion is only a means to an end. I guess I'm not going to talk about the economic portion because the purpose of this series is to talk about the political component, because everybody already knows about the economic portion. They know about the destruction of Black Wall Street. What they don't know is the political piece. By 1921, 35 Black area housed over 600 Black-owned businesses, Black entrepreneurs, and had accumulated millions in wealth, creating a complete self-contained economy where Black dollars circulated within the community multiple times before leaving. The Greenwood district had its own banks, insurance companies, newspapers, hotels, theaters, and luxury shops. Black professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, architects served Black clients and reinvested their profits in Black-owned businesses. It's a far cry from what we see today, right? As soon as you get any kind of money, it's going out the community. This economic infrastructure served McCabe's political vision perfectly. Wealthy Black businessmen could fund political campaigns without depending on white donors. Let me emphasize that again. Wealthy Black businessmen could fund political campaigns without depending on white donors. This is the reason why all your politicians are completely sold out. This is the reason why cash reparations are not going to do anything, because you need political power too. I get the two go. They work in tandem. So you need political power, but you also need economic independence. So if you can fund your own politicians and they don't have to rely on donations from AIPAC or whoever, then you're going to get policies that actually serve your community. But when you're not self-funded, right? These campaigns are now self-funded, not funded from the community. Then the result is they're going to cater to whoever put them in office. So this is how politics work. It's really a numbers game. They do focus on, you can't win without having money. If you don't, you can't do, as someone who has actually attempted to run for office, I'm going to tell you firsthand that you can't win without raising money. The grassroots approach, the door knocking and all this, it's a lot of work. It's an uphill battle. It doesn't matter. Like what they care about, what the voters care about is that you got media coverage and that you have an appearance of legitimacy and authority. So if you don't have all the money, you don't have the campaign behind you, then in most people's eyes, you're not legitimate. They're not going to take you seriously. So you have to raise money. People don't even look at the third-party candidates or those who are write-ins or anything like that. So they're looking at the major two political parties. So they're relying completely on the media, which means in order to curry favor within the existing framework, you're going to have to raise millions of dollars. And because we don't have the money, then this is the reason why we get the politicians that we get. Black newspapers could promote Black political candidates without worrying about losing white advertisers. Let me read that again. Black newspapers could promote political candidates without worrying about losing white advertisers, right? No, we don't control the media. So, I mean, BET is not even owned by us anymore. So, and that's not even local. On a local level, I mean, I guess we have the final call. Who reads that anymore? Right? When you go in the hood, you get a bean pie and that's what I would do when I was little. My brother had no interest in that, but I would get a bean pie and I would get the final call because that was my only source of real news. Even when I was like 12, 13 years old, I didn't trust the mainstream media. So I bought the final call. Black banks could provide loans to Black farmers and entrepreneurs, creating economic independence that supported Black independence. Now, let me show my second video.
Some African American communities are prospering, like the residents of Greenwood, a suburb of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Here, former slaves were given land after the Civil War, and this rare footage shows the thriving town they built. A remarkable Baptist pastor named Solomon Sir Jones is the pioneering filmmaker. His footage was lost for more than 50 years. Jones captures the bustling life of Greenwood, which could be any American small town. But Tulsa's whites don't like what they see. In May 1921, after a black man is accused of assaulting a white woman, a white mob rampages through the city. For a night and a day, they loot and burn Greenwood. A Fox News crew captures the only surviving footage. It is the bloodiest racial massacre in American history, leaving nearly 300 dead.
Now, there are various iterations of what actually happened, but the story that I heard was something about a black man accidentally stepped on a white woman's foot when he got on the bus, or I don't know. I mean, the story has different versions of it. I guess we'll never really know the truth. But at the end of the day, it probably was just an excuse. They were looking for any excuse to destroy Black Wall Street because they were already seething at the teeth that these Black people were prosperous. This was right. I mean, this was maybe 60 years after slavery, right? They were trying to rebuild themselves. They were trying to get some dignity. They had pride because this was communities that they had built themselves. They took ownership of it. They took pride in it. And they employed a lot of white workers. It's the inversion of what we have right now, where we're completely dependent. We have to go to them for jobs. No, the whites were coming to the Black business owners for jobs. So what made McCabe's vision so dangerous to existing power structures was that it was a completeness. It wasn't asking for integration into white-controlled systems or begging for better treatment. He was creating a parallel power structure that could potentially control an entire state. Oklahoma had approximately 50 all-Black communities at its peak. I'm not going to say all, but I don't know, in all the literature, they keep saying all. I would imagine it wasn't all, but it was a Black majority, right? So maybe it was all. I don't know, but they used the word that Oklahoma was supposed to be an all-Black state. That's impossible. And it was going to be, and it had these all-Black cities and counties. I don't know. I wasn't there, but according to the literature, they're using the word all. If these communities could coordinate politically while building economic power through enterprises like Black Wall Street, they could fundamentally alter the balance of power in American federalism. A Black-controlled state would have 2 senators, multiple representatives, control over federal contracts and resources, and the ability to influence national politics. I'm going to address this in greater detail when I get to the section where I address how having a Black-controlled state would be the first step towards getting reparations, because you do have access to so many resources and you can use it strategically. Now let me get to this other video I have about the destruction of Tulsa.
Oklahoma had 45 Black towns and municipalities. It was capital of Black self-determination. Black people came for the same reason as whites, for new possibility. They saw in Tulsa an opportunity for business. Tulsa itself was a boomtown.
The reason was in 1905, an oil well wildcatter discovered the Glen Pool, which was the richest small oil field in the entire world.
And so when the city began to boom because of oil, it just drew more people.
These professionals and merchants in these smaller all-Black towns, they then migrated to Tulsa. They're coming by train, they're coming by wagon, they're walking, they're getting there any way that they can. And as this city of Tulsa goes from this sleepy cow town into something else, there's a part of the city in the northeastern corner that becomes the primary African-American settlement, known as Greenwood.
I liken it to a city within a city. Greenwood itself is an area of nearly 40 square blocks, with individual neighborhoods, individual churches that have their own parishes.
About 40 to 45 blocks of a residential community with a business district.
Greenwood community was staked out by a fellow named O.W. Gurley, who really is the father of the Greenwood district and established the first business there in 1906.
Gurley was a very community-focused, visionary leader who saw in Greenwood, the promise of creating a community where Black people could flourish.
O.W. Gurley and J.B. Stratford, they worked together and they had a specific intent to make African Americans wealthy, landowners, entrepreneurs. They both knew what the state of Oklahoma was offering. They knew that they needed to be very intentful in creating Greenwood.
These were members of a Black community who were showing Black people that a new world was possible. They were a sign and a symbol to Black communities about all of the wonderful things that we could be.
You have all sorts of businesses in Greenwood. You have everything from funeral parlors to theaters, hotel. There's a public library, a Black library. There are chili houses, cafes, restaurants. There's just everything there.
There were a dozen surgeons and doctors. There were several lawyers. There was a Black-owned photography studio.
There are Black working people. They're not working necessarily in oil, but they're working in all sorts of businesses that are supporting the oil boom.
Greenwood was a community of necessity. It was a segregated enclave. Black folks couldn't ply their trades or purchase goods and services in the larger white community, so they created their own economy. That economy became successful because Black folks did business with one another and kept dollars largely in the Black community.
What happens in Greenwood is that segregation, which is not necessarily desired, segregation actually enables Black businesses to thrive, Black professionals to thrive.
It was a district where, in fact,
Let me stop and comment on that, because a lot of people are really lamenting integration, because it really has thwarted Black success. I don't think that most Black people necessarily wanted integration. They didn't necessarily want it to be bused into different schools, but they had a lack of economic investment in their communities. These were thriving communities, right? Because it wasn't just one Black Wall Street, there were several. But the problem really came into play when you traveled. When you went out of state, there were no hotels where you could stay. There were no restaurants where you could eat. So you had to pack your lunch. You had to go to a restaurant on the side of the road. And then you would hope that you didn't get in trouble at night, that somebody didn't harass you. And that was the problem. So it wasn't that they necessarily wanted to integrate. They wanted their own thriving communities. But when they traveled, they did want to have access to facilities. But I don't know, it's too late to revisit what already happened. But maybe if that had been allowed to be successful, we could have had other states, right, or other counties and cities that had businesses, and then they would know where they could stop, where they could eat and use the restroom. But I guess we'll never know. What we have now is integration, and it's not working.
money, dollars, could turn over 5 or 6 times.
In Greenwood, you could, as a Black person, you could advance. And you had a number of individuals in the community that were prospering because of the success of Greenwood. Booker T. Washington coined the phrase Greenwood as the Black Wall Street, or the Negro Wall Street of America.
Let me just make an additional comment, because when I guess the only community I can really make the parallel to is the Jewish community, because when they were establishing their communities, right, they had their newspapers and their media, and they told them every ethnic group does it. It's not just the Jews. The Asians do the same thing too. They tell you to support Asian businesses, to support Jewish businesses. We're the only group who's not doing that. And then when you do it, you get a hustle ran on you. You don't get good service. Nobody takes pride in it anymore. And so you want to support Black businesses, but you already know they're not going to give you a fair price. The quality may not be good. So yeah, the way things are now, I don't know. I think we need to take a step back and we need to really look at what has been done in the past and try to course correct, because just supporting individual Black businesses is not going to get us nowhere. It has to be part of a larger concerted effort to gain political and economic power. But supporting individual businesses, no, we need to have an actual Black Wall Street like we had before that can actually employ people that can have political power. But supporting individual businesses, no, that's an okie doke.
As the community grows and grows in affluence and grows in confidence, these race men and women come to the fore. They articulate a kind of outrage about racism. They articulate a kind of self-determination. They articulate a resistance.
Andrew Jackson Smitherman worked as an attorney and as a journalist. He was a Creek freedman and teamed up with J.B. Stratford to create the Tulsa Star, the first daily Black newspaper in Oklahoma.
The Black newspaper at that time was a forum for pointing out Black achievement at a time when white newspapers presented Black people only in crime. But the heart of it was an agitation for justice and an agitation against lynching.
At the same time that's happening, you see in the summer of 1919 a rise of racial terror all over the country.
New York, Philadelphia, Memphis, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Elaine, Arkansas. We could go on and on and on.
A lot of these riots are really fueled by anxieties about Black advancement and Black success. And we're not only talking about cities like Chicago or DC or New York, we're talking about cities like Tulsa.
In 1921, those same tensions in the United States were present in Tulsa. And it did revolve around jealousy and resentment. It threatened the system of white supremacy.
Certainly in Tulsa, which was an incredible concentration of Black wealth. You can look at Tulsa as a tinderbox. Like, what is the spark that's going to ignite it?
All right. Let me keep going. So Black Wall Street was a real political threat. It wasn't just economic. Of course, jealousy was a component, but they understood what was going on, right? The accumulation of wealth in Greenwood was directly being used to fund McCabe's vision of a Black politically controlled state. Wealthy Black businessmen were contributing to Black political campaigns, funding Black newspapers that promoted Black candidates, and creating the economic infrastructure necessary to sustain independent political organizing. One second, y'all. So white political leaders understood that if Black Wall Street continued to grow, it would eventually provide the economic foundation for Black political control of Oklahoma. I want y'all to understand that the reason that they destroyed Black Wall Street, I mean, I guess you can use the parallel of what Israel did to Palestine, right? It's like they were oppressing Palestine all those years, and then all of a sudden there's an incident, and then they use that as an excuse to completely burn it down to the ground. that's essentially what happened here. There was an incident where a black man allegedly stepped on a white woman's foot, and they decided to burn the whole city down. Like it's just absolutely ridiculous. So if the economic power was allowed to continue to grow, then eventually it was going to lead to political power, and they just were not going to allow that to happen. It wasn't a spontaneous event. This wasn't some unsophisticated group of, disgruntled poor people. No, that's not what this was. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign to destroy the economic foundation of McKay's political vision. And I'm going to tell y'all the reason why this is true. That this wasn't just some random event or series of events. In 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice found that the 1921 Tulsa Massacre was the result of systematic racially motivated violence targeting Black residents of city's Greenwood district. The Justice Department found that the attack was so systemic and coordinated that it transcended mere mob violence. The Tulsa Museum history of documents that Jim Crow, jealousy, white supremacy, and land lust all played roles leading up to the destruction and loss of life. On May 31st and June 1st of 1921, local newspapers deliberately inflamed racial tensions with one headline encouraging to the public to nab Negroes for attacking girl in elevator. Right, that's what I'm saying. There's different stories, because I heard that it was because he stepped on her foot, but now the newspaper is saying that he attacked a white girl in an elevator. That's not the version that I heard. But the attackers didn't just burn random buildings. They were organized and efficient in their destruction, as they specifically targeted the institutions that provided the infrastructure for Black independence. They destroyed Black banks that provided capital for Black business development. They burnt Black newspapers that promoted Black political candidates. They attacked Black political offices that provided services without dependence on white-controlled institutions. Most tellingly, they used airplanes to drop incendiary bombs on the Greenwood district, making this one of the first aerial bombings of civilians in American history. This level of coordinated military-style attack required planning, resources, and official cooperation that went far beyond a spontaneous race riot. They're going to act like this was this random, right? No, this was the state. The state participated in this conspiracy. State authorities didn't just fall. They didn't fail to protect Black Wall Street. They also actively participated in its destruction. The Justice Department's 2025 report found credible reports that some law enforcement officers participated in murder, arson, and looting. The Oklahoma National Guard, which should have been protecting Black citizens, instead helped to intern Black survivors in concentration camps. Local police deputized white rioters, giving them official authority to attack Black property and people. Okay, I want to talk about rioters, right? They want to talk about all these people and these Black Lives Matter. They're rioters. This is the first large-scale riot that nobody even wants to talk about. Historical records show that out of 5 counts of an indictment, Police Chief John Gustafson was found guilty of 2, negligence for failing to stop the riot and conspiracy for freeing automobile thieves and collecting rewards. So this police chief was found guilty for he negligently failed to stop the riot, and he was found guilty for he was found guilty for engaging in a conspiracy to free the thieves and collecting rewards. So this is what I'm telling you. These are state officials who were working in tandem with the civilian rioters. So this was a state conspiracy against its own so-called citizens. This is the reason why I'm telling y'all that the 14th Amendment is bullshit in the regard that it made us citizens of the state instead of giving us a territory for ourselves. So how are you going to force it? It says you shall, or I forget the exact language, but I did read it to y'all that the descendants of slaves are citizens of the state and the federal government. That seems preposterous that you would turn us over to the very states which were oppressing us. Historical records show that, no. After the massacre, state and local authorities blocked insurance companies from paying claims to Black property owners, preventing them from rebuilding. Although city officials offered to rebuild and help the victims, they failed to do so, and they also put up barriers. They changed zoning laws to make it difficult to reconstruct the types of businesses that had made Greenwood prosperous. They implemented building codes that made reconstruction prohibitively expensive. This is what I'm telling y'all. This is the reason why you need to have sovereignty. I know firsthand that these barriers to entry have literally destroyed my life, but they can control your occupational licenses. They can control zoning laws and building codes. And you think that cash reparations are going to be enough? No, it's not going to be enough. They control everything. The Justice Department noted that the trigger for the violence of the Tulsa race massacre was the kind of unfounded condemnation that at the time was commonly employed to justify unspeakable treatment of Black men. Black men, it wasn't just Black men. Of course, it was Black women too. This coordinated government response reveals the true purpose of the Tulsa race massacre. It was state-sponsored terrorism designed to destroy Black economic independence and prevent the emergence of Black political power that could threaten white control of Oklahoma. So basically, McCobb's his dream, because we always want to talk about Martin Luther King's dream. He had a dream for a Black state, and it was thwarted through white mobs. It just is what it is. They went around terrorizing people. These were domestic terrorists, most of whom were never brought to justice. There was never any compensation to the victims. 300 people were killed. There was never any remuneration for the destruction of these Black businesses. We're just supposed to act like none of this ever happened. We're just supposed to get on with our lives and just pretend that racism was not a component to it, that America was never a racist country. And I'm not one to sit here and harp on racism, but these revisionist conversations that we're having today are absolutely ridiculous. To say that racism was never a component of American history. Are you out of your fucking mind? I'm not saying that it is the only component, that everything is racist. I'm not saying that. I think most of it right now is about the state controlling everything. And because the state's political power is majoritarian, it leans towards white supremacy. And so I'm not whining about white supremacy as much as I'm saying we should be able to level the playing field. We should have our own damn state, and we can do the same thing that they're doing. We can have policies that serve our interests the same way they have policies that serve their interests. So I know somebody's going to unsubscribe because I'm saying this, that I'm being a racial separatist. It is what it is. Actually, when it comes to this series, I'm not really going to sugarcoat too much because I really don't care. I do want a Black state. I do want to. The question is, what am I going to get out of this? I want to control the State Bar Association. I want to get rid of the draconian law license requirements, which has destroyed my life. So, yes, this is for my rational self-interest. I want something out of this. Y'all asked me, do I want cash reparations? I don't want fucking cash reparations. What I want is to destroy the fucking Bar Association and actually have a practice of law that is reflective of the general population. Not some bullshit exam which has nothing to do with competency. I guess that's just an aside, because this is not really, everybody's trying to get something out of this. Y'all want money. I wanted to destroy I want to destroy the Bar Association and create a new licensing scheme which is fair to everybody. I guess I would like to get rid of all occupational licenses so that we can have a free market, but everybody wants something out of it. So if we have a Black state, we can have control, and we can have an honest discussion. We can renegotiate the social contract, and everybody can bring their grievances to the table, and they can talk about what they want, and we can come to a resolution that represents us. But under this current system, we don't have a fighting chance. The majority does not give a shit. You're just a forgotten man, the forgotten woman. They don't give a shit about what's happening. They don't even give a shit about their own damn people, because their own people are suffering too, by the way. Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking about this. They don't care. So you need a state so that you can advocate for your own community, so that you can advocate for your own people. And if anybody wants to debate me about whether we should have an actual state, they're not going to debate me. They're just going to unsubscribe or whatever. I'm going to end this live stream because I guess I'm pretty much done. But I want y'all to understand that Black Wall Street was not just destroyed because of jealousy or because of economic competition. It was also a political component. They were trying to create a Black state, and nobody seems to know this. This has been completely written out of history. So as I get further along in the series, I'm going to explain how we can reconstruct a Black state project, how it's going to be the first step in getting reparations, and basically it's going to be the political solution to most of our problems. We can get everything you want out of it. Socialism, you can have thriving businesses, you can get protection from police brutality. You can have a government which actually represents your interests, that isn't oppressive, that actually is subject to the will of the people. But there's many components to it, and it's layered. So I can't cover it all in one video or one live stream. So I'm going to break this down in small pieces so that I can actually explain it. And then I guess we need to actually get to work to actually try to make this happen for those who support. I don't necessarily think that my channel is going to garner any support, but I do tag other content creators who have a larger following, and hopefully one of them will actually take interest in this. That's the reason why I tag y'all, by the way. So if you got a tag, it's because I think your channel is important enough to, I don't know, I think that you have enough pull in the community that you can actually help to make this happen. So I did have more, but I'm going to leave it at that because I think I made the point. I think McKay's vision is just as relevant today as it was over a century ago. The systematic prevention of Black sovereignty in Oklahoma reveals exactly why cash reparations alone cannot address the fundamental problems facing Black America. As long as Black people remain subject to a white-controlled state institution, our prosperity, our rights remain vulnerable to the same kind of systematic destruction that eliminated Black Wall Street. The question isn't whether Black people can govern themselves. McCabe and other Black towns of Oklahoma already proved that over a century ago. The question isn't whether Black people can create economic prosperity. Black Wall Street already demonstrated that beyond any doubt. The question is whether we have learned the lesson of McCabe's experience and whether we are prepared to build the kind of integrated political and economic power necessary to achieve and defend Black sovereignty. McCabe's failure wasn't due to any lack of capability or vision. His failure was due to the systematic use of state power to prevent Black independence. Understanding this history is crucial for any modern attempt at Black sovereignty because it reveals both the possibilities and the challenges that any such effort will face. The path to Black sovereignty is still open, but McCabe's experience teaches us that we must be prepared for the same kind of systematic resistance that destroyed his dream. We need economic power protected by political power, federal legal protections backed by organized Black political pressure, and most importantly, the understanding that white authorities will use coordinated violence to prevent Black independence when they feel it threatens their control. Thank you for listening to the Black Anarchist Podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The struggle is real, and the fight for liberation is far from over. Get sovereign or die trying.